Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to this week's edition of Belonging, Imperial's One's Belonging series, which is a candid interview series about exploring the experiences of BAME individuals and what they've gone through to get their sense of belonging. And this week, I am so happy to have with us Dr. Garrick Wilson. Garrick is a training manager for the Cancer Research UK at Imperial College, but he's so much more. Garrick, I'd just like to really welcome you to the session this week. And I'm going to start off our session by asking a question related to your early years, your sense of belonging as a youngster, how you developed that and how that's helped you where you are now.
Good afternoon, Wayne. It's great to be here, and thank you for the kind welcome and the invitation to participate. Really interesting question. So I was raised in the sunny Caribbean island called Jamaica, and I was raised there until about 14 years old when I first came to the UK. But humble beginnings. We were from I would say, very poor background, limited resources. The matriarchs of the family were pretty much the guiding force, as my father has been quite absent for an entire period of time, I would say since I was age 5. And in those early years, those sort of formative years, I learned what it was to have nothing, which has given me a great ground and a great underpinning to being able to be responsible and to manage that, which I have now most effectively and most well. So really, that's how I started. I came to UK when I was 14 years old, and it was a whole different way of life, a whole different culture, a culture shock in many ways, you could say.
Okay. How shocking was the culture shock?
Incredibly shocking. First of all, I thought this place looked depressing in that I came here in the winter, I recall. And coming from a country rather where everyone was in the sunshine, you're probably wearing lighter clothing and colored clothing and things like that. And you came and everyone was in their black clothing, their gray clothing, their dark blue clothing. It just looked so depressing. So that was the first thing to sort of adapt to, was just the cold temperature. The food as well had a different taste. So there was all of that. Of course, I had a very strong accent at the time, and whenever I spoke, I would just stand out, and that was slightly uncomfortable for a while. So there was a lot of adaptation to understanding the nuances, the small nuances in culture, in communication, in interaction, socialization, and so on and so forth.
It's a pivotal age that you came across as well, because 14 is where you're beginning to stretch as a young man to identify with who you were. And you've just been uprooted from the sunny island of the Caribbean in Jamaica. You've come across here where people are just looking at you. When they hear you, they're either not understanding. How did that whole transition affect you? Give us some idea about that transition for yourself.
Put simply, I wanted to go back.
Right.
And I recall my mother hiding my passport for the better part of 2 years, because the threat of going back was real. I wanted to go back, and I just didn't feel comfortable. It's that sort of, I've never felt that attention was drawn to me so much before for all the wrong reasons, I thought, in that if I sounded a certain way, because I had a very strong Jamaican accent at the time, people will automatically start looking at me in certain ways. I've never felt anything strange about being around people, because coming up in Jamaica, I'm always around people who look like me. So that was normal for me. However, I recall coming here and I was sent to a predominantly white school, very few Black students there. And I never felt that strangeness before, where you walk into a building and everybody's looking at you because you stand out. I mean, I'm conspicuously Black. You can't miss me if I walk into a room. That was I can't find the words to articulate what that felt like. It
Mhm.
was just this sense of strangeness, surrealness. I don't belong. Are they thinking that I don't belong as well? How do I belong? What do I need to do? Do I need to adapt to become more like them? Can I truly express myself and be me?
Mhm.
It was a strange place to be in, and one that I had to spend a period of time figuring out.
So in terms, so you're thrust into this school where how many other black students were there in the school, or was it very, very few?
There were under 10 of us.
Wow. And how big was the school roughly?
So a big school, roughly, we had, if I recall correctly, over 300 pupils.
Wow,
Yeah,
fair enough. So you stood out. You guys
absolutely.
stood out. You stood out. And especially so this would have been just before your GCSEs effectively.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to build the picture between your Caribbean experience and your experience now in the UK and how that affected your sense of belonging. Because in the Caribbean, you belonged. Everyone looked like
Absolutely.
you.
Mhm.
Yeah. Spoke you, there was no language barrier or accent barrier, etc. Um, and how were you doing academically at school in the Caribbean? And then compare and contrast that to
Mm.
your experiences here in the UK.
Mm. Academically in Jamaica, I was excelling. I was considered to be one of the top 2 students in my year.
Mhm.
And I was doing incredibly well. All my subjects were over 80%. So I was in that A grade category.
Mhm.
And when that transcript was taken here as part of my enrollment process into the school here, that was somewhat disregarded
Mhm.
in that I get the sense, or I got the sense that it was seen that the education received in the Caribbean was somewhat substandard to what would be delivered here. I found that to be the opposite, actually, because much of what they were teaching here was things that I already learned subsequently in lower years or younger years in the Caribbean. And so I found that argument to be void. Um, English, for example, and English literature were subjects that I excelled at. And I recall clearly my English teacher saying to me, we're going to put you, one of the English teachers saying, we're going to put you into the bottom set for English because your accent and the way that you articulate certain things says that you haven't got a firm grasp on the English language, and therefore you will struggle in the higher set. And that was the case for other subjects as well, where I was put into that sort of lower set category because assumptions were made that because I'm coming from a country which was seen as a developing country, that my educational standard was not where it's supposed to be, and therefore I would struggle being in the higher set, even though the academic record was clear and clearly stating otherwise.
See, I struggle with that. I'm just gonna ask this question again. Were any assessments done to, and by assessments, did they give you any tests to when you got into the school to assess what level you were at, or was it just an assumption of because of the way he speaks he can't have any understanding? Which was it?
I recall no testing. It's clearly assumption. All of this was assumption based.
So I don't want to over egg the point, but it was just basically the fact that they looked at who you were, they listened to how you spoke, and they then made a decision. He won't be able to cope with the higher level of study,
That's
and
correct.
they just put you straight into the bottom set.
Mm-hmm.
Did you challenge that? Did anyone challenge that, or what was the process there?
So I recall my mom challenging
Mm-hmm.
that. However, that didn't get too far. And as all good, I suppose you could say, Jamaican parents would say,
Mm-hmm.
they would say, work hard. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you can work harder than your peers. You can work your way out of that. But I recall that she was a single mom. She had a lot on at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I do recall that there was only so far that she could take me to in terms of that challenge process. Those years were, they're also a learning journey for me in
Mm-hmm.
that I'm not just adapting to a new school, I'm adapting to a whole new country, a whole
Yeah.
new way of life,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth, which means now that I had to be figuring things out in those times as well. which challenge wasn't the first thing that came to my mind. It was more a case of, okay, how do I navigate this? What lessons, what are the key lessons that I can learn from this going forward in the future? And really, that's what I spent those years doing. It did, however, mean that I did leave GCSEs as an A-star student coming from Jamaica. I left my GCSEs here with no grades higher than a C because I was capped in those lower sets. That's what it meant. However, when I went on to college, those were times for me to really excel in that I knew I could do better. And as a result, I went on and did better.
Tell me what's your motivation though. Tell me what's your motivation, because when faced with all of these challenges, people just making assumptions, you're in a new culture, a new country, and what was that inner self-belief which enabled you to believe, you know what, I'm not paying any attention to what you're saying. I'm not taking on your label, right? What was that? Where did you get that from?
Tell you a funny story. I was actually a very unruly child, disobedient, they would say in the Caribbean. And you know what happens to disobedient children, and especially parents will beat you. But I was disobedient because I recall at one point in life, just before I came here, I woke up and I said, categorically, I'm not going back to school. I had a problem with the way that the education system worked, in that what we had was a group of people in a classroom together, all with different interests, all with different ways of learning and understanding, etc. And yet the system is to rank us against each other, compare us against each other. And I didn't like that comparative approach because it just didn't work for me, and I didn't think it was the fairest way. From then, I think I was an activist. I was protesting as to exactly how things work. And so I woke up one day and decided I'm not going back to school. And I dressed up in my school uniform, but I actually didn't end up going to school. And it was sometime later, I was staying with my grandmother at the time, that she realized that I wasn't attending school. Of course, that means that she was trying to catch me, to discipline me in the way that any firm Jamaican guardian or person of responsibility would. But hey, you couldn't catch me. That was just me. I was
no. The thing about it was, I was just watching your expression as you was doing it, and it was kind of like the rhythmical beating as it was coming through.
Come on. Well, you know those ones where when you do get whipped, there's a word to every whip. How many times, you know, that
that's right.
And if you do cry, then it'd be asked, why are you crying? And you don't cry, it's like, oh, so you're not feeling this. So you know, you could never win with those ones. But I recall, yes, she didn't catch me. I would wake up very early and leave the house. Didn't go to school. I'd come back very late as well. When everyone was asleep. Don't ask me how, but I used to find a way into the house, even though the doors were locked at that point. But you know, I just had all these thoughts going on in my head, in that just doesn't work for me. And I recall when it was coming to the end of the academic year, my grandmother said, no, we're just going to have a sit down conversation. This is not me trying to get you to scold you or anything like that, but let's just sit down. And in that conversation, she said to me, you need to go in and take your end of year test. These end of year tests were important because they determined how you were set up for the year, the coming year. Were you going to be placed in the top set? Were you going to be placed in the bottom set? My record up to that point has been clear. I was always in the top set. Not going through these tests would effectively mean that I'd fall out of grace or fall from grace, so to speak. And said, no, you need to go to the test. And my reasoning at that point was, I've not been there for some months now. And if I go and do those tests, I'm going to fail anyway. So it matters not anyway. But she was quite convincing in that she started to speak to me in a very profound and interesting way, as almost like a forecaster, in saying, I see these wonderful things for your future ahead. I see you in the future pursuing academic excellence. I see you in the future as a doctor. I see success and greatness on your life. And it wasn't just a casual giveaway statement. There was this sense of, I'm not just saying this to be nice. I'm saying this because there's a deep-seated conviction within me that you are more capable than you think you are. I just need for you to be able to see that yourself. Subsequent to that conversation, I was convinced, so I went and I sat the test. And having not been there for quite some months, when the results came out, and what they did in Jamaica is that if there's 40 of you in a class, for example, they'll rank you from first to last, depending on how you perform on exams. And they would put that on the notice board so everyone can go by and see them as well. So everyone knows if you're in the bright category or the don'ts category, as they used to say then. And when the results came out, I was in the top 2. I was ranked second in that class, only beaten by 2% by the person who was there top, who had a 100% attendance record and therefore knew what was being taught. And that shocked me. The outcome of that was shocking to me. It wasn't shocking to my grandmother, because that's exactly what she was alluding to in the conversation which we had. It shocked me because to this day, in thinking about it, I don't think there's anything special about me. Sort of, I'm not some gifted academic genius or anything like that. I do work hard with much discipline in order to achieve. But it shocked me in the sense that grandmother was right. And before I'm from a very sort of Christian family, religious family, but before she said any of these things to me, she was prayerful. She would pray into these things, and she believed in the power of faith to bring breakthroughs in difficult situations. And I was shocked because she saw that, and she saw potential in me, and she just prayed through that and prayed for me. And as a result, I succeeded. That underpinning really helped when I came to the UK, especially going through college. After experiencing everything that I did through the school years. That underpinning really helped when I got to college to recall the words of grandma, to recall teaching, counsel that says, you got this ahead of you. And I think every now and again, we need people in lives who are sort of like forecasters, like the weatherman can tell what's coming ahead. That's what we need in life sometimes, people who genuinely see something in you, on you, and really encourages you or enable you to go on and actually achieve. And those were the things that really got me through the college year, to remind myself, actually, I'm an A-grade student. Actually, there's greatness on my life. There is much that I can achieve. And actually, it doesn't matter what the results of secondary school may have said, or what experiences I may have had there, feeling like I didn't belong. In order to belong, I'm going to be actively now having to put some effort into carving out a niche for myself, and to effectively progress or pursue a future where I can make a mark that no history itself can erase. So that's the kind of mindset I took through college years.
Your grandma taught you well. Your grandma, she spoke words of life.
Absolutely.
Into you, yes. Because she saw the pathway which you were going down wasn't a pathway of edification. Right? It wasn't sanctified in those kinds of ways.
Yes.
But she was able to demonstrate to you in that simple request of taking that test, right? It enabled you to see the vision, see a vision which you couldn't even see yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it kept you going through what you didn't even know were challenging times to come. Yeah. Absolutely. I would love to have met your grandmother, because she definitely has instilled wise words and culture into you, which is absolutely brilliant. So tell me about then, so you've got into secondary school, not secondary, college, you start to excel.
Yes. Yeah.
And so how did that then manifest itself in what you then wanted to do, and to kind of like lead you to where you are now?
Absolutely. So I had to resit some GCSEs just to up my grades a little. But alongside those, I did A levels in human biology, chemistry, physics, and English literature as well. I was told I wasn't good at English. That was funny. But I did that as well. And I absolutely loved those college years. I felt no longer as a stranger in this country, but somebody who's achieving something. And also I sensed opportunities that I lacked growing up as a child in Jamaica. Remember, I said I was from humble beginnings. Everything in Jamaica you had to pay for. If you go to school, you have to find the fees in order to pay the school fees. And here I was now in an environment where there are so many opportunities available. One of the things that saddened me at the time was that my peers, Black peers from the community in which I was living in here, they didn't seem to have that same drive, that same enthusiasm. They were sort of segregated to certain subject areas of certain academic disciplines. I recall being questioned as to why I would pursue the sciences. That's pretty much not our world. That's not what we do. What are you going to do with that? And I found that mindset quite strange at the time. But you know, I didn't let that deter me because I had a goal, I had a future. My mind is a wandering mind. I'm curious. I like to explore how things work. I like to be able to answer the big problems, to bring solutions, not be so much problem focused. And that's why the sciences really captivated me and drew me in. And I really did well there. And it was my intention to go off to university and do medicine. Started there and I really hated it because what I found that was going to lead me to was this idea of repetitive, you know, through a diagnostic process, for example, you just basically try to work through a series of scenarios. Hopefully you get to the right answer. That didn't expand and stretch my imagination enough. And so I decided to pursue a PhD. And really that's where I came into my own, just understanding how things work. And two of the areas that really grabbed my attention were oncology and also virology. And I sort of ended up working with oncogenic viruses and how they lead to cancer, specifically liver cancer. And really that's where I came into my element because I was providing solutions or creating knowledge that does not yet exist and providing solutions to one of the big world challenges. And that's just, the possibilities for that they're just amazing. And yeah, love it.
Listen, I can see the passion from just when you're speaking about the subject, about the whole curiosity, the excitement, the excitement that the curiosity makes. I think that's wonderful in terms of the oncogenic viruses and how they develop. There's a couple of questions which kind of like fly into my mind in accordance with that. One, this is a slight aside. The support network which you had, because you came over from Jamaica, what support mechanism did you then have here? Because in Jamaica, you had your friends, everything like that. What was the support mechanism that through those times? I know you had your grandmother, but your grandmother was back in Jamaica, right? So what support mechanisms did you then develop or have in place to also assist you whilst you were here, going through this journey into kind of like medicine, then doing your PhD? What happened? Where did you get your support from?
So unfortunately, not long after arriving here, grandma passed away. So unfortunately, one of the biggest heroes in my life just passed away. And in coming here, the biggest support structure was the church. I was plugged into a church community with a Pentecostal distinction. And that was just incredible. The things you learn there in that people will just make sure, one, especially if you're going through exam season, they'll make sure, one, are you eating enough? Just those little things, even though your mom at home would be providing all those things, they'll be baking cakes, they'll be dropping them off. They'll be picking you up and say, you need a break, let's take you to a restaurant, you need a day off, etc. They would cheer me on. They literally, I remember when I graduated, it almost felt like it was an achievement and an accomplishment for them all. They all wanted to be at the graduation ceremony. They all were willing to pay pounds for a copy of my thesis. That they didn't understand a thing written in it, but there was this sense of, you know what, you achieve, we all achieve. And that's because through it all, they were there to offer advice, they were there to support with their resources, they were there to support with their prayers and just their encouragement as well, and just have this active investment in seeing me succeed. And I think that was just incredible. I can't be thankful enough for that.
Oh, fantastic. So the family, your grandma passed, but you found a community, a place to belong within the church, and that's kind of like shielded and helped you develop since then.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
that's wonderful. So tell me something. I'm going a little bit aside because to me, it's very evident that the church holds a strong connection for you. Okay. I'm just also thinking about your passion for science. Did you ever have a disconnection between science and the church? Because there always sometimes seems to be a struggle between the two. Yeah. So how did you overcome that?
I think for me, from the very outset, let me put it like this. Oftentimes you'll see a rocket taken off and it breaks through the atmosphere and it's out of this world. And really, that was the experience of going to university, in that it was this broad, expansive thinking, a sort of gaining of a broader worldview. At some point, though, if that rocket is returning to the Earth's atmosphere, it is a dangerous time, because it can either return well or it can burn on entry. And having gone out and got this broader worldview, being at university, and then sometimes trying to sort of reintegrate back into church, you know, there was some burning at points, because there were sections or elements of the church with some contradictions here. We can't marry well with those subject areas. That's not what we do, because that's a challenge to our faith. That's a challenge to our understanding. Those who were incredibly supportive. For me, it was never a problem, in that a lot of people view science from the Christian faith with some trepidation, in that they feel that it removes the wonder and the mystery from faith. I, however, take the opposite view, which is that science and the explanations that it brings and the understanding that you gain from that actually helps to bring this sense of wonder and mystery to the fore, and out of that solidify one's faith. And so for me, it was never a problem at all. And also recently, even more recently, with the whole coronavirus pandemic and development of vaccines, etc., and church communities, you know, really just scrambling to understand what's going on and what to advise their congregations in terms of taking the vaccine or not taking the vaccine. You kind of really see this church really now gravitating towards, we need to understand science. We need more people who are in that discipline or those disciplines to be able to talk to us about what this is, how we should respond to it, and help us to carve out a strategy and a vision going forward. And so I think it has come full circle in sort of helping me to really help a lot of churches, especially in the the current pandemic, we should say, to sort of navigate their congregations and what to do with the vaccines and so on and so forth.
So that's a really good answer, because it's almost as though your grandma was envisaging a time such as this, a time when your skill sets, which you have of understanding viral pathology, how viruses work, how vaccination works, would be put you in front and center for communicating knowledge in places where it may well be have been restricted or have a lack of understanding. You can add that voice of clarity and add that voice of reason, or not even reason, that voice of this is what it actually means. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And I think what I found with these communities as well is that they more readily receive this kind of clarity from someone who identifies as part of their community as well. And that actually helps a lot. So it has opened up some interesting doors and some interesting opportunities for me. And more than ever, I've seen church communities, Black church communities specifically, interested in science, the scientific process. More than ever, am I seeing parents as well, Christian parents, encouraging their young Black children to pursue the sciences, to pursue medicine, and to advance in those areas as well, because they realized in the last pandemic or the current pandemic that, you know, we were caught off guard, and we need people within faith who can really bring clarity of thought as to what's going on.
So this isn't to say that science supersedes the religious belief, as it were, but it complements it. So it's a complement. It's a complement. It's complementarity. Yeah. And so for you, it's a very strong sense of the two work hand in hand. They have to work hand in hand.
Yes.
I don't want to put words into your mouth, but
This is where I would describe it. Science informs me with knowledge.
right.
Faith informs me with a sense of being, a sense of purpose, a call, you could almost say. This idea that I live by, that everyone is here for a specific reason, where you should be able to wake up on a daily basis and have an ethos which says, for this cause I was born, for this reason I exist. And that's what faith instills, this sense of being and this sense of belonging, and how that can actually be utilized to shape history, to shape lives for the better, to bring clarity to this world, and to leave it hopefully in a better way than you found it. And it may seem like a tall order, in that how is one person going to be able to do this? And what faith just says, you know what, don't ask the questions of how or whether, just have that imagination that it is possible. And once you have that imagination that is possible, that guiding force, you can literally do incredible things and change lives. So that's the sense of being, whereas science informs, and that's how they two complement each other. But ultimately, that's how it works for me.
I like that definition. I do like that definition of the science being your information platform and your faith being that purpose, the purpose for your existence, the purpose for your being. That's a beautiful way of looking at it. So I'm just wary of the time because we did start a little bit late. I'm just wondering if there are any questions which anybody from the audience or has. If you do, just raise your hand or whatever. I've got one already. I'm going to bring Omar in, and then I've got another couple of questions which I'd like to ask. Omar, if you ask your question, please.
Yeah. Hi, Garrick. Pleasure to meet you, man. Really nice to hear your story. I just wanted to ask, since you've basically been adjusting to kind of how things are in the UK, etc., do you feel more welcome now that you've kind of had a time to adjust, etc., or do you feel that things are still kind of, still have some ways to go, should I say, versus when you came over?
Thank you, Omar. Fellow Jamaican, I see. It's good. It's good. Really good question. Really good question. I think, has things improved? No. Are things being more exposed? Definitely. The terrible killing of George Floyd last year brought to the fore what was a shock for a lot of people. For me and a lot of Black people I know, was that a shock? No, it wasn't, because we understand the reality of police brutality or systematic oppression, injustices and inequalities. So that wasn't a shock to us at all. I don't think things have improved. I do think things will never improve until entire cultures, entire institutions, entire financial setup and things like that are in a place where they would actually make room for people like me to flourish, whereby a person doesn't have to defend their worth simply because of the color of their skin or the sound of their voice. And that's still very much the same today. You may get sometimes small comments such as, oh, you've got an exotic voice. Okay, it sounds nice and you want to smile at that, but that's nothing to smile about, because that's not the sum total or the worth of me. And it's just challenging those things. But that's on one side of it. The other side of the coin that I believe needs challenging is there is this sense that I've observed since coming here, in that when you gain opportunities in the Caribbean, you go for them, you grab them with both hands. Here, I see that the opportunities are available, but it's there to pick and choose whether you do or you don't. It's really up to you. And I do think that perhaps it created a sense of procrastination about the matter. And therefore, my encouragement here would be that people in this country need to have this sense of you can achieve anything and actively push to go for subjects, not just what they see their peers in their communities going towards. Aim for institutions like the Imperial colleges of this world, although very white-facing, come in, show them that we are people of worth as well, challenge every system that you see. And for me, one of the things I do every summer, I try to create projects for people of my community to come into Imperial and do research projects to get a taster of science and how that works. And that inspires them often to go off to universities. A couple of them are now doing medicine at university. One of them is doing a science degree at university. But this is because they say, you know, I'm here not just to be seen or to be ticking a diversity quota box, but actually to challenge your thinking to say that, you know what, people like me are of worth, are of value, and therefore you won't forget that at any other point in your future existence. So I would say things have not changed. However, I do feel a sense of belonging now, because one of the things that I've been successful in doing, and I would encourage others to do this as well, is build communities wherever you go. Build communities wherever you go. Talk to people. And if they don't want to talk to you, that's okay. Talk to them. Bring something that is unique that they don't already have. And also have a sense of supporting others, in the sense of me bringing people into work experience. My ethos there is not just to explore you or expose you to something and say, look at me, look how great I'm doing, etc. My ethos there is to thrive. Go past me. I'd be very happy to build a ladder for you and watch you climb higher than me. And in fact, if you have to employ me one day and I have to work for you, knowing that I actually helped you to get to where you are, I need to be humble enough to be okay with that, because this is all about raising and lifting each other up, and it's not about personal egos or satisfaction. And I do think when we have this sense of community, that's how we're going to challenge much of what goes on here in terms of oppressions and inequalities and things like that, because until we cohesively come together, we're never going to be a force to reckon with. I hope that answers.
No, definitely, 100%, man. To be honest with you, that's, yeah, what you said is extremely profound, and I agree. I think it's like super important for us to provide a platform for each other to basically just be recognized for the force that we are. So yeah, 100% agree with you. Thanks for that, man.
Thank you.
I agree with that as well. I'm just scribbling down little notes from grandma's vision, right? Grandma had, I don't know what when grandma was down on her knees and she was praying about you, Garrick, she had a vision, right? And it was a powerful vision. That's what I know, because the words which have come out of your mouth, talking about building communities wherever you go, that is such a powerful notion. Because that then, as you said, it then means that you belong wherever you are. Absolutely. Because you've made yourself belong. Yeah, Garrick, that's absolutely wonderful. Are there any other questions? Otherwise, I have one more question which I would like to ask. Right, I'm gonna ask. So you're still a young man. Where do you see yourself? Where's your 5 years, 10 years? Where would you like to see yourself? What would you like to see yourself doing?
I'll answer in this way. The pandemic has taught me some very interesting things about myself in terms of the world that I'd like to see emerging from this. In my current role professionally, I oversee a really unique training program. We call it convergence science, which is where we amalgamate engineering, physics, chemistry, computer science, and cancer biology to really accelerate technologies and methodologies that would benefit cancer patients in the clinic. So it's all these different languages and disciplines converging with each other to come up with a common way of tackling a real problem. And as part of that, I'm trying to build the next generation of convergent scientists and clinicians who will not only speak the language of biology, but be able to understand other disciplines as well, which will help a lot. and things like that, building a future, building or setting people up to really succeed and change how certain things are done as a result. That's really what my mind or my heart is gravitated towards. And just watching the pandemic and the impact that it's had on the Black and ethnic minority communities, whether it be disproportionate numbers of us dying, job losses, the impact on mental health and well-being, and so on and so forth. It made me ask the question, what's the post-lockdown world that we'll be emerging into? So many health conditions would have been would emerge. We're going to have that pandemic of the mental health crisis to deal with. People would have lost their jobs, their businesses, a sense of being. What are we going to do with them post-lockdown? How are we going to respond to those individuals? The government moved rightly in setting up a furlough scheme for those whose jobs were impacted. And I think that was a great initiative. But the levels of money that was poured into that tells me quite clearly that if we really wanted to make a move to end homelessness, for example, in this country, that could have happened. It just doesn't happen, it seems, because when it doesn't affect us directly, then there isn't this sort of vigor to respond. COVID affects everybody. Of course, now there is a vigor to respond. So it's how do we respond in the world that comes. And I'm an advocate for justice. And when I say justice, what is right? What is equitable? How do we make sure that it's not just the UK that's vaccinated or the rich Western countries, but that this is a global problem. And until we all get vaccinated, we're probably all not going to come out. We all need to come out before we come out, before any single nation comes out. How do we advance and pursue these things? And so for me, the future going ahead is to champion things that are just, champion things that are right. And part of that framework is to build my community, my Black community, to make sure we have scientists and doctors coming through from those areas, people who are engaged with medical research and how that works, clinical trials, etc., such that if anything of this disastrous nature ever happens to us, again, we will know how to respond and not concede rather to conspiracy theories and other thoughts. So that's part of it, championing members of my community to succeed in other areas, is to really take an institution like Imperial, for example, and say, you know what, these are some of the things you're going to need to do in order to be welcoming or be more sort of multicultural, given that you're in a multicultural city, but it doesn't seem to really reflect it on the campuses. It's championing for those who are vulnerable. One of the things, especially with health inequalities, I'm probably sounding very depressed right now, but one of the things that happened just before the pandemic is that my mom unfortunately passed away as well. And in leading up to that, she had a debilitating heart condition. And in the lead up to that, I would remember sitting in doctor's appointments with her. And, sometimes she'll be in pain and she'll be asked by the practicing doctor, where's the pain? Can you explain the pain to me, etc. And being of Jamaican heritage, sometimes we have very interesting ways of articulating. She would say sometimes, it feels like an elephant is sitting on my head. And when patients say something like that, I found through experience that things like that can be ignored because it just seems trivial. It doesn't have as much weight as you properly saying it in a clear way. And those are reasons why, and I've heard others with similar stories, and those are reasons why people don't get the proper treatment and that they require or that they need or that they should get. Those are things that really concerns me, that I really want to champion. And so as part of that, I've set up a mentoring initiative where I'm currently mentoring, I think it's 51 Black young men between the ages of 15 and 25 at the last count, to really thrive and to really succeed and to counter the narrative that you see when it comes to young Black men, especially in the city of London. And they're doing great things now, from law to media to politics to business. They are thriving and they're coming through well. So these are the things that it's just building the next generation. And that's how, for me, I'm going to leave this world better than I actually came and found it. And really, that's what drives me. That's what motivates me. Everything I've learned so far from my academic disciplines, my science pursuit, etc., is all giving me that mindset. Faith has given me that mindset as well, to really put something in place or to build something credible.
You're an inspiration. You're an absolute inspiration. I said it earlier on, but I'm going to say it again. You've lived your grandmother's vision. You are living your grandmother's vision. She had a prayer for you. She knows what that prayer was. She imparted that prayer, and you have done your best to actually fulfill, through the grace of the Almighty, that vision. And as you said, the mentoring scheme which you alone are doing sounds absolutely phenomenal. And we want, if we can support and help you in any way, then we are here. All right, because it's you're one man by yourself, but if there's 5 or 10, how many could we impact? Yeah,
absolutely.
So your story is phenomenal, right? And all power to you, right? And in your faith walk, keep strong. Okay, don't let anybody turn you around. All right, and I don't think that's going to happen, because grandma will, metaphorically, grandma's there with
God forbid she'll come back. Yeah.
So, Garrick, it's been wonderful listening to you this afternoon. Absolutely. I'm going to have to invite you back on at some point in the future, because I want to monitor your progress, and I want to be there to help you in whichever way we can. Okay, Imperial as one are here, and what you've just said to us has been so inspirational. So thank you for sharing your story.
No, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Really good to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to just share what we're going to have on next week. But wow, it was amazing. So next week, we're going to have Melanie Lee, and she's an organizational development consultant here at Imperial College. And she's got a fascinating story as well. So we have just such a wealth of talented people. It's amazing. Absolutely. I just wanted to say that if you haven't seen, or if you'd like to see more recordings of the Imperial as One Belonging series, you can find it on our YouTube site, which is tinyurl.com/belonging-IAO. And I wanted to just put a shout out to the Caribbean Labour Solidarity event, which is going to be happening on Sunday, which is remembering Dr. Walter Rodney. Now, I'm pretty sure that, Garrick, you would have loved to have, I'm pretty sure you probably know about him, but you seem to be cut from the same cloth as this man. And they're going to be having Professor Richard Dainton from King's College University, who's going to be discussing the legacy of Dr. Walter Rodney, and that's on Sunday at 2 p.m. So if you've got time, please tune in and have a listen to that. But until next week, I want to wish everyone a pleasant week, and we will see you again next week for Belonging. Thanks very much.